Hey there, Adam here with the Losi 22 mid-motor conversion kit. With this video, we're going to go over the start of the assembly where we're going to be focusing on the rear end. If you bear in mind with me, I will be stopping periodically to write down what screws or hardware I need that do not come with the RTR kit that was pulled off from the disassembly stage. That way I have a list of what I need to include with the assembly of the chassis to be a full kit for you to have no issues with. So with that being said, let's get started. So we are going to grab our rear end pod that we left pretty much all assembled together. I'm going to go off the habit right now just because of what I think I'm going to need. I'm going to tighten my spur up just in preparation for racing the class. So we're going to start off with this rear pod piece. It's going to trim off so when it comes to threading into plastic, especially the 3D printed parts, grease is going to go a long way to cut those threads and make sure they go together without cracking plastic. Hopefully everything's robust, that it won't, but you never know what may happen. So we're going to be inserting the motor guard into this slot here. So you're just going to pull this back a bit. This will be a good snug fit. Make sure it's seated all the way down. You're going to push in the bottom of the shock tower, and now that pops right into place. You're going to take two M3 10mm screws. All the screws pretty much will be M3. You're going to take two 10mm and going into these large openings, feed the screw in. You don't want to reef on these, you just want them to be snug. You don't want to risk squishing or cracking the plastic. Okay, that's good. Next up, you're going to grab the front bulkhead that has the aluminum bar in there. Make sure it's in there. It can pop out, so just make sure it is in there. And you're going to seat it into the opening with the holes facing towards the shock tower. So that's in there. So once that's seated in there, you're going to push it up to provide the biggest gap you can between that plastic piece, the bulkhead, or the plastic piece, and the bottom rear pod. You're going to grab this plastic piece here that's 1/4 inch thick, and you're going to insert it underneath that pod piece that you just put in previously. So that is the initial assembly for the rear pod. You're now going to grab your chassis, and you're also going to grab this 1/8 or 3mm thick insert spacer. If you do intend to use the wheelie bar, so if you plan to use the wheelie bar, you'll see how that holes line up. You're actually not going to use this insert. There's going to be a half insert that you can print off that finishes off the remaining here. So there'll be a half insert print that is this kind of profile here. That'll take up the same height, which will allow you to put the wheelie bar underneath the transmission, kind of like as such. But because it's being built for Real Street, I am not installing that, so I'm using the full insert. So that full insert would just kind of line up here. And you can see there is this cutout here for a 60-gram brass slug you can insert in there if you wish to, included with the kit. That brass slug pretty much lines up to the center line of your axles to put that weight right over top of the wheels. Start with that, and we are going to start off using 30mm, there should be probably 6 of them, 30mm countersunk screws that would be supplied with the kit. Also, what I suggest is with the carbon fiber, at least for your bottom chassis, for you to go around the edge with crazy glue to help strengthen and protect the chassis. So I like to start off with the 2 screws that thread into that bulkhead because they're already threaded from factory. So I'm not going all the way with the electric drill. I'm going to finish it off with the screwdriver. And I'm not going too fast because I don't want to strip anything. I am not going to fully snug them just yet. I'm going to get all the screws installed first and then tighten up after. Okay, so that's in there. It's still a little bit loose. I'm going to insert 2 screws up front. Okay. The rear that goes into the shock tower. And we will now begin snugging these 6 screws up here. So I haven't fully tightened them down yet. I just got them so they're kind of touching the carbon fiber. And now I'm just going to go back over those screws to tighten them up fully. Don't need to go too crazy hard. You don't want to risk stripping the plastic. Alright. Next step is the arms. So you're going to need your pins. Insert them in there. And these arms are going to be following the same way they were installed initially, so that the actual, they're going to be kind of almost pointing in the opposite direction from initially on the chassis. Make sure you don't do what I just did there and put that arm upside down. And so now those are seated. You're going to come in with the rear braces on the chassis and you're going to line this up. Now, what I discovered from factory, how these are actually installed, your arms are actually set up in an anti-squat position. And what that means, why is that saving that way? In an anti-squat position. So what that means is that when there we go, the arms are actually tilted backwards, and it prevents weight transfer. So now you have the option to adjust your rear anti-squat, and that is done with the inclusion of shims here. Kit will come with 2 shims, but you can either put like 1 mil or 2 mil spacers, or you can print off an extra shim. I'm going to use 1 shim, and by putting 1 shim into the rear, it will put your arms completely flat. If you have no shims, your arms are going to be angled more down in the rear, which will reduce the amount of weight transfers to the rear upon acceleration. And if you put 2 shims or more, it's going to increase the height of the arms in the rear, aiding weight transfer to the rear. So another, looks like probably 2 more 30 mil screws will go into the rear. As well as 2 M3 screws. I'm going to add a little small dab of Loctite on top of those screws, as it's going to be metal on metal contact. grab my wrench. And finish tightening it with my hand wrench. And you don't want to go too snug because it will just draw the nut into the plastic, which you don't really not want. So now the next thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to actually have to take our rear knuckles and we're going to flip them side around. So we need a 1.5 millimeter driver. We're going to remove the screw in the front. Screws removed, push the rod out. Free that knuckle, and we'll repeat it on the other side. That's out. We're going to flip sides. And the reason why we're doing this is if you look at the knuckle, you can see that it's off-centered one way, and we want to bring that piece as far back as we can to line up better with our tie rods in the rear. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take these ball studs and I'm going to flip it to the other side. And again, this is just being done to line up straighter with your rear tie rods. Those flipped around, line your dog bone up, and snap in your ball studs. Pop that one off. Alright, and that is your rear arms reassembled. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to grab the front chassis, the rear brace, wherever I had slid it over to. There it is. So here's the rear brace, and if you notice on the rear brace, there is two different diameter holes. There's a smaller diameter which is meant to be threaded, and then we have a larger one here. So we're going to slide this in the back, and we are going to put the end that's supposed to be threaded. So the end that's threaded, the smaller hole, would be on the same side as the aluminum motor mount plate. And we are going to look at our bin of screws to determine, I think it's going to be those really long ones we use for the wheelie bar. I'm pretty sure that's what I have to use. So we're going to use the long one for the wheelie bar. I'm going to thread it through. Put a dab of grease. readjust the bracket so it lines up to the bottom chassis. We're going to grab two countersunk screws. These countersunk screws are 10 mil in length. Dab of grease. Alright, and that is the rear brakes mounted in there. So that has significantly brakes or strengthened up the rear end area. So that's quite stiff. Next up, we'll grab the rear floating body mount bracket. And we're going to remove the two screws that I have not yet pulled out from the top. So these screws here have a thread length of 12 millimeter. I'm bulking them at 10, so we're going to need something around 20 millimeter long threads. 20 to 22 mil. There's a 20 right there. Yep, two 20 mil. Sure the top of these threads are cleared. Mark the stringiness away. On a wrench. That's in there. And it'd be sweet if I can use these. I'm gonna use these two original 12 mil screws in the back area of the floating pod. The two 12s that were initial front up here are being used in the rear. Just be careful because the threads are a little soft up top there for whatever reason. Alright, so that is that bracket in the rear installed. We're going to now take two ball studs that'll be included with the kit, and we're going to go to the arms, to the rear arms here, and we're going to install it in the inner holes that are on the front side of the arm, towards the front of the chassis. To be honest, I kind of screwed up, I guess you can say, a little bit. Shouldn't probably pop those on just yet. We have these two rear floating body mount links. So we're going to grab two flange bearings. Alright, good. Take the flange bearing, you can see the J to the protruded side. We're going to push from that side. I try to make these a good snug fit. So you might have to do is either use a pair of pliers to kind of get it started, pushed in. And sometimes you might need to push it on a table. So that went in pretty good. So why I said you might not want to pop those on just yet is because getting these to pop on may require a pair of pliers, so it's kind of sometimes good to not have, you're not pushing on the ball, or pushing on the plastic ball end, but on the stud itself. But I'm going to try to go on the bottom of the arm here, or knuckle, just below the stud. Okay, so that's popped on. This side. And that's popped on. So these pieces that are 3D printed actually have the profile for the ball stud, and you can see they swing pretty good. There's really no play in them, and they're really free spinning. I'm really happy how those came out. So we're gonna grab now the rear carbon fiber floating body mount bracket. So we got this one right here. And take a look at our screw bin here, and we want to find a screw that would stick out just long enough for the bearings and carbon fiber, and hopefully long enough to put a screw on the back side as well, which this might be just perfectly long enough. This screw length here is a 16mm screw. We'll give this a shot. So we're going to start off with a screw. I'm going to grab 2 bearings. So we got 2 flange bearings here. What we're also going to need is spacers. So again, these will be included with the kit, and you're going to need 2 times 2mm shims or spacers. And the reason why this is that it allows you to kind of tighten down the carbon fiber, and it's going to press on the bearing race instead of compressing the bearings, so you can snug it up still and still have a free moving. So you got the screw, bearing, 1 shim, or 2nd shim. We're going to go through the back side. I'm going to use a screwdriver to kind of hold that in place. We're going to grab the other bearing, which will get sandwiched together. Next up, we are going to grab a 1/2 mil, or it's going to be like a 1/4 inch washer shim. Feed that in front. Grab a carbon fiber piece, which would be tapped. Thread that on. I'm going to drop a dab Loctite. Let's thread that on. So it might take a little bit to get that kind of worked in again, because it's just 3D printed plastic, so it's not the smoothest of surfaces. But as you mess around with the car and play with it, it will tighten up, or smoothen up, sorry. Alright, so I'm just going to write down so far how many screw shims are used there. Next up, we're going to go thread those onto the chassis. And we shouldn't need an overly long screw. That length should do quite well. And the screw that we're grabbing from the chassis is a 10 mil. So we're going to go insert a screw through the bearing, which we seated. We're going to go ahead and grab 1/4 inch shim. Thread that into the carbon fiber. And I don't really want to say snug that one up all that much. You're just going to have it kind of, you might need to have it a little backed off or something like that. It just all depends on the thickness of the print. I might maybe see about lowering the thickness of that area. And we're going to finish up with 2 more nuts. So we're going to grab our Loctite. Put a dab on each end. Thread them on. And what I'm just going to do, before I tighten them up, I'm just going to back these screws off just a hair, 1/8 of a turn. That way there is going to be a little bit of gap, so it won't bind. And then just snug those 2 up. So now you can see as my suspension moves up, that is floating really nice. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just kind of brace the front up here. So we're going to take the other screw that initially in there. We'll just feed that back through. Now you don't want to overdo this because it will kind of draw itself and pull itself in. You don't need it snug, tightened up all the way. It's just to keep that there so that you kind of don't separate and move on you. So once again, don't really snug it down. Even be careful and screwing this side off. That's why I'm using I'm using the nut on the opposing side. Yeah, I'm kind of messy when I build. That is a really bad thing I happen to be like. I'm very unorganized. If you see around me, it's complete zoo around here. Okay, that's good. And again, you'll see when you tighten it up, obviously I still have gaps in here. It's just to prevent it from shifting, moving up and down. We'll grab, hopefully these are the right screws for the shocks. Just going to check, because I would actually have a nut. So nope, that's too short. So I believe these would have been them. And the length of these screws are 30mm long threads. This appears to be them. I think that's what they are. Once that's on there, plus a nut. See, that seems too long. I don't think. Give me a quick second just to check it out the chassis. Alright, looks like I almost put the wrong size screw on there. It's not the 30mm. These are 25mm long screws. I'm going to feed them into the top. I apologize. Here's that one. I should assume to have another pair. Oh, so the front shock here are thinner. Original tower. Okay, it is thinner, so it actually could be those 30 mils. I'm gonna say it is a 30 mil. It only seems like there might be only 2 of those 30 mils as well. So that's there. We'll grab the 2 nylon locking nuts. And it could be quite possible you actually did not need to take these off initially on the car. Probably didn't have to, so I apologize for that step. Make sure these are snug so they don't spin on me later on when I put the knot on. I'm just going to tighten that up by hand. I'm going to leave putting the shocks in later because I need to rip the shocks open apart, and I'll do that at the very end. So that being said, that is your rear end installed.